Good afternoon, dear class. It's nice to be addressing you even though I can't see you, but I'm hoping that you can see me and are puzzled by what you see in the background, which is not the distinguished bookshelf of a man of letters sitting in a leather, an antique leather armchair, but rather like those late show hosts who've been banished to their attics, like Seth Meyers, from their studio, from their exalted studio background. I am greeting you from my bedroom, which is full of boxes. You can see one just over my shoulder because we've just moved into this very nice house in the woods that I think you will have glimpsed at the bottom of my email. And so this is where I'm speaking to you from, banished to my bedroom. But it's a great pleasure, and I hope you're seeing me, and I hope I shall be seeing you if you're kind enough to follow my request in my email that you might send me a 12-second a video of yourself. More than 12 seconds would be great. Any amount of time would be lovely. In any case, I will get a glimpse of who you are. If I don't know you already, as I know a good many, well, probably about a third of the class, 10 or 12 of you, I know already. I know what you look like. I know what you did last summer. Many of you did a class with me. Not worth a movie, but it was certainly fun. And the rest of you, well, this is me, please show me you. So a brief introduction now to our course of study, the 18th century novel. This is when the novel blossomed in the English language. The actual genesis of the novel, the origins of the novel, are a little hard to be too exact about. People have always told stories, and they've been writing them down for a very long time. And many of them were in verse, but many of them were also in prose, and many of the great ones were written long before the novel Tristram Shandy that we're about to read, and are still read, just as Don Quixote is still read, and Robinson Crusoe, which was written 50 years before Tristram Shandy, and was a huge success. And really the development of the novel as we know it, which we may as well call the modern novel, in the 18th century, was down not to how literary genres replace each other, but the fact that there was an audience. There was an audience a little like us now under COVID-19, an audience of people at home, a middle-class audience who could afford to sit home and read books, as we're doing, but not under compulsion, just because they could afford to. So this audience was excited by the prospect of books reaching them by installments, which is why the book we're reading is divided actually into 9 volumes and subdivided into many different chapters. And as continued into the 19th century, the novel that came out in a series of installments was great excitement, rather like watching a TV series as it came out and reached you. So this was happening in the 18th century, and there were many wonderful novels. I apologize for this streak of light across the screen. It's not the blinding light of genius. I don't know what it is, but I hope it goes away next week. Yes, so there are many novels, many excellent novels written in the period immediately preceding Laurence Sterne's life, particularly a wonderful novel called Tom Jones, a rollicking, hilarious story by a man called Henry Fielding, who was also a prolific playwright. Sterne, I feel a strange connection with. He was born in Clonmel, a town in Ireland, where my wife was born. Not too many distinguished alumni of that town. And in fact, Sterne was being trucked around from town to town in Ireland because from garrison town to garrison town, his father Roger was a military man, and they went all around Ireland and all over the place. He had a peripatetic childhood, did young Lawrence. And then sadly, his father was sent off to Jamaica, where he caught malaria and died when Lawrence was quite young. By this time, Lawrence was back in England. His family, the Sterns, came from Yorkshire. So although it would be correct to call Sterne an Anglo-Irish novelist, and anybody born in Ireland is endowed with that gift of the gab that only Ireland can bequeath. So it would be a shame not to think of him as Anglo-Irish, even though by the time he was, I think, 10 or 11, he was back, maybe even younger. His rich uncle sent him to, because Roger, Sterne's father, was not wealthy, because he was the youngest son of a wealthy family, and his brother Richard, Sterne's uncle Richard, sent him to a school in Halifax in Yorkshire. And Yorkshire is actually where the family hails from, and where eventually Lawrence Sterne ended up. There's a complicated story as to how his body actually ended up in Yorkshire after a sojourn after death in London, during which time it's believed his body was stolen from the grave and his skull may have disappeared forever. It's a sad and gruesome story. Poor Sterne, a wonderful, delightful, witty, extraordinary man and writer, suffered from weak lungs, and TB took him relatively early at the age of 54. Indeed, he didn't begin writing really until he was around 46, is when he started, at the age of, when he started on this spectacular book, widely acclaimed to be one of the funniest books ever written. I'm sorry to say that to you, because it's very hard to live up to that. You can only really gaze at it in sublime indifference and say, what do you mean, funny? However, acclaimed as it is, it was produced by a man who barely began to write until advanced middle age, certainly not knowing he only had another 8 years to live. But in that time, he produced this enormous book and another shorter book, also much loved. But the book we're going to read, Tristram Shandy, has been admired by more remarkable authors right up to the present day than perhaps any other of the founding novels in our modern literary tradition. There are no surrealist novels to match this, except possibly the works of Rabelais, the great French novelist who Sterne admired greatly, and whose tradition of digression as the heart of the novel Sterne continued. In fact, Sterne says so quite clearly that digression is the essence of the novel. An interesting proposition, and one which I think we'll have plenty of chance to consider as to how much lies in that of truth. As somebody who's devoted their life to writing novels, I'm certainly interested in that question. Is this the heart of the novel, digression? It's not a clear spine and core with a few outgrowths swiftly returned from to get back to the main highway of the book. It's really just a sequence of quite irresponsible improvisatory riffs, and that's largely how Sterne conceived it, and how it has lasted to this day, having outflanked almost every modern and postmodern work that was yet to come in sheer improvisatory glee and perversity. An extraordinary thing. There he was, a middle-aged parson, a curate in a Yorkshire village, a fairly boring life, a wife he didn't get on with too well, a daughter he adored, not a whole lot of money. Suddenly he sits down and rather rapidly, much more rapidly than we're going to read him, rapidly produced this book, which instantly promoted him to fame across the educated world. he was admired so intensely by writers like Voltaire in France and by Goethe in Germany and elsewhere, that the failure of the great Dr. Johnson to see anything of value in Tristram Shandy is all the more glaring, but it's the instance that proves the otherwise universal truth that this is a work of immense inventiveness and certainly immense influence over all the literature that has followed it. So that's our book, and it's important that you know that it's not absolutely out of nowhere, that Robinson Crusoe is already in existence, a very popular book, and many, many romances and adventures that people enjoyed in the oh goodness